10 Steps Further is a podcast designed to help you get 10 steps further along your spiritual journey. If you've been on your journey for 30 years or 30 minutes, if you believe in God, or even if you're not sure He exists, all we're trying to do is help you get 10 steps further. I'm Jonathan, and this is Jack, and we're just taking a walk. Why don't you join us?
Hey, Candy Springs. I'm here with Hannah Branch. Hannah Branch is an amazing counselor, and she's helped us a bunch on 10 Steps Further. In fact, just this month, I think we are releasing a Hannah Branch episode of Raising a Child with a Cell Phone. You have to listen to that. But I felt like in this season that it would be good for our people to hear from a counselor. And I want to talk about a couple things, what people are feeling, and maybe give us some ways in which we can stay healthy mentally at home during this.
Absolutely.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what people are feeling, and you guys, you've said the other counselors have slowed down. You guys are blowing up right now.
Yeah, and I think that reflects a lot of what we're seeing across the board. Part of it is that I think a lot of people are either extremely stressed and are going into kind of hyperdrive work mode, where they're the ones that are considered the necessary employees, feeling a lot of stress, and then a lot of other people have gone kind of two very stark extremes. People are staying home, have a lot of time. So we're seeing quite a bit of a contrast in that. And
Sure.
so people's practices reflect that as well. Some people are seeing tons of people. Some people are really having a hard time.
So for the people that are, let's say the people that are stuck at home, what are some of the emotions of that that people have to deal with in that space?
So many emotions. I think part of it is that what we're seeing just kind of a tremendous amount of grief come up for most people, and the amount of loss that they've experienced. And I think
Loss. Now speaking to loss for a second.
Yeah. So loss of jobs, loss of social connection, loss of face-to-face interaction,
Right.
just loss of finances, security, some people loss of houses, loss of family members. So I think the loss and grief stages are something that we've seen pretty rampantly. And so a lot of the different stages, and you can kind of even just watch people as they go, of a lot of depression, seeing a lot of hopelessness, seeing a lot of kind of resorting back to lots of naps, taking lots of time for themselves, feeling very, very, very low levels of motivation.
Yeah.
So you're seeing that side of things where they just can't seem to get up and get motivated. Some people in anger
Right.
phase where they're really upset, feeling like this is very unjust. Their freedom's been taken away from them by things that are completely out of their control. You just see it kind of a lot of different parts of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Denial, like, I don't need to do this. This doesn't apply to me. So we're seeing kind of the full range of stress response reactions in people. But I would say probably without exception, I've not seen a client who has not had some elevated stress response over the last 6 weeks to a pretty extreme extent, and just feel a lot of abnormal emotions that you're not used to feeling, because every part of your safety, security, stability is kind of thrown up.
I've just noticed
overnight.
in myself through this that early on it was like the taking naps, I was feeling less motivated, and it was really grieving a lot of that.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what about the people that are having to work more? Because then you have people who are doing their jobs and they're doing it from home, but their kids are there and they're homeschooling. Talk into that for a second.
That has been very interesting and really hard, I think, because life continues to go on. And I think because there's such a different manifestation of stress in everybody, that part of it is that these people, you're seeing a ton of output, while you're also simultaneously hearing a lot of people in your world who are extremely bored, who have nothing to do, who are getting really antsy. And so I think that the polarity causes a lot of stress.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm seeing quite a bit more resentment than I've ever seen before, of having to work extremely hard and then seeing other people not carry their social weight. And so you're just seeing so much really core work come up right now, of this sense of injustice, this sense of, if I'm carrying my weight, I can't hold all the parts that are put in front of me. And so what do you do when you can't do all of it?
So from a counselor's, maybe I have the wrong understanding of this, but this feels like an opportunity to work on some things that are really foundational in us. Like, the reason these things are coming up in this season are not the season. It's because they're in here.
100%.
They're already in here.
Yep.
And so now they're coming out, and now we have to deal with them. So, what are some healthy ways in which we can deal with some of those core things that are coming out of us in this season?
That's a good question. I think part of it is giving yourself permission to own what you're feeling. And I think there's a lot of pushing away of feelings of I'm fine or
Right.
projecting it onto your kids or onto your work, but really beginning to own I don't feel myself. I don't feel well. I feel off. And what's happening inside of me. And I think that there is so much underneath that for so many people. And so in a lot of ways, this is really an ideal season for therapy because the ability to be able to say, what happens to me when I lose all the things that shape my
Right.
identity? If I'm a therapist and I'm no longer able to help people, that just pulls up so much in people.
Right. I'm a pastor. I'm no longer able to speak in front of people.
Yes, totally.
And it does, it feels to me like to get to this space of where my life is a little bit quieter, where I'm journaling more and I'm walking more so that I can be in tune with some of those things that I'm actually feeling. What I tell people when I call them is to allow yourself to grieve. I had a friend who they had planned 12 different vacations during 2020 because he worked really hard the last 2 years and they've had to give all those up. And he goes, well, yeah, but there are people who are really sick. Well, that's true. But you're grieving, and it's okay to grieve that, right?
Yeah, and I think grief is grief is grief. And part of it is I think that there's a lot of value in learning about the stages of grief so that you can better understand what's happening inside of me.
Right.
But loss is loss. And I think that we see a lot of comparative suffering right now of, oh, I'm not a nurse, and I think that a lot of that is the but is really, really causing the emotions to be pushed down rather than to say, how do we actually allow these things to come up? Can you get in the shower and allow yourself to cry? Can you get in your car and just scream and just move through some of that emotion? But we're so afraid of touching the emotion because it feels invalid or it feels odd or it feels maybe more intense than we're used to feeling.
Wow. Yeah.
So I think part of it is beginning to say this is just really hard.
So you get people to that place where they can feel what they're feeling. Then what?
I would say if you can feel what you're feeling, then beginning to work on what it looks like to sincerely connect and to be able to move through and say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing and I need a team of people. I mean, this is just, there's so much pain right now and there's so much isolation and suffering. And I think even the illusion of connection, oftentimes I'll hear people think that I'm in a family system or that I'm in a marriage and therefore I'm lucky because I have somebody. But I think the illusion is that we're connecting when in all reality, I think that there's a lot of people that are just independently moving about their houses and not actually taking the time to say, I'm hurting. And part of what is really meaningful and what's going to help me move through this is to actually connect to you. And so it sounds funny when you're with people all the time, but we lose a lot of intention when we see people just from familiarity.
Sure.
And so beginning to say, could there be space to really meaningfully connect to people in a socially responsible way that actually allows you to begin to process the feelings and then connect as a result?
What are some ways that people can do that meaningful connection that you've seen work?
It kind of depends. It's a little bit different. And I think based on your temperament, some people really enjoy Zoom. Other people are experiencing pretty high levels of Zoom fatigue.
Yeah, right.
But for most people, a lot of that has to deal with one-on-one face connection. And so even being able to connect to people on a one-on-one basis is really relevant because I think in Zoom, the social dynamics can be very interesting and you're trying to navigate a lot of factors all at the same time rather than being able to say, who are my really safe people? Who are the people that sincerely hear me when I'm hurting? And can I begin to build trust with them by reaching out and saying, hey, I'm not sure what's happening in me, but can I have some space to talk it out?
Wow. Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's vulnerable and scary, but important. I remember one of the first things I did, I was driving out, I had to go pick up my daughter from school, and I had these hours and hours, and I called a friend just to check on him. He's been my friend for about 30 years. We spoke for over an hour and only about 10 minutes on Corona, but the rest was just laughing and enjoying and talking about our lives. And that was very life-giving.
I love that. Yeah, I had a friend call me the other day and she said, give me the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
And I just felt like it was a really refreshing thing for me to actually even give myself permission to pull up the things that felt ugly in me. Right. This is how tired I feel. This is what's happening. But even that of having the normalcy of saying, hey, can we kind of set a timer on our Corona talk of, 5 or 10 minutes because that is absorbing so much of the space. And if that's such a fear-based conversation, and that's what most of our conversations are about right now, that the intention of saying, hey, let's end Corona talk talk and let's begin to just engage with each other. What's it like being a homeschool mom when you're
Yeah.
also a full-time
Yeah.
working mom? What's it like to cook all of these meals? I mean, just so many abnormal
Right,
things that we're
right.
not used to.
So I'm going to give you one more shot. Is there one other thing that you think that people can do to stay healthy mentally in this season?
That's hard. It's hard to narrow it down to one, but I would say honestly, a lot of the things that you hear across the board are really important. And a lot of the things that are pretty standard and often feel monotonous in terms of sleep and self-care and the ability to make a routine for yourself. There's just so many things that you're hearing on Pinterest and on Instagram and all these different places
Right.
of beginning to really prioritize the self and really working to say, I need to actually invest in me in order to be able to be healthy and accessible to other people. And so the willingness to both prioritize those things, saying, you know, sleep really matters right now. And while you don't have a lot to get up for, can you begin to set
yeah,
something that
yeah.
gives your body some structure? Because I think when your structure is taken out of your work week and when all of your weekend events and church and these scheduled things were gone, that what happens internally is it creates a lot of chaotic room. And so
Gotcha.
the ability to begin to say, what are the things that are predictable? Could my sleep be predictable? Could my eating routines and my ability to engage in worship on Sunday and to do these things actually begin to pull our body back into some sense of order and predictability, I guess would probably be the best word.
Right. Yeah.
And so the willingness to say structure, which often people push back on, I don't want that, I just got free from that with work, can be really regulating for our bodies. And so
Gotcha. Yeah.
the
That's
normal
good.
eat, sleep,
good.
sleep, water, those things really make a big difference in the middle of all of this.
If you need more of Hannah, and everybody does, there's a couple ways to get it. You can look on our 10stepsfurther.com page, and we'll highlight some of those for you this next week. I'm going to shut this down because we only have a limited amount of time. We're going to keep the conversation going, and we'll put up more of this interview for you guys too. You can also reach her at cultivate.com. Is that right?
Cultivate San Diego.
CultivateSanDiego.com if you need her. Thank you, Hannah.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Jonathan, was there a question that you wanted to ask Hannah?
No, I just like being a fly on the wall. There's a lot of good in that, so that's great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right.
So, any other thoughts about what people are feeling and how they should deal with that?
I think part of it is honestly, I think I'm seeing so many people who are just really, really, really having a hard time. And people that are used to having it really well put together and a lot of really high level performers and working professionals, and people are just unraveling. And so I think the permission to be unraveled is a really big deal, even in my own body, to say it's okay that this is really hard. It's okay that you have no script as to how to handle this. You've never seen this before. Clinically, people will come in and say, well, what do I do? And in my body, I'm like, I've also never, like, no one trained you in grad school to go through a mass pandemic. So, and for the first time, I think in most people's lives, everything that's coming into my office also has to deal with me. And so, but you're seeing that across the board, that when people come into the hospital, that they're also in fear, rather than saying, you have this and I can support you from here. It's now,
Right.
we have this, and how do we do this together?
Right. Well, I imagine. Have you had a counselor talking with you about all of
lots.
this?
Oh, lots.
Yeah, so me
Yeah.
too. I've just called my counselor this last week and says, hey, and we're going to do it on the phone. I like to
Yeah.
be able to walk and talk.
Beautiful.
So how do you help people? Because it's not just now. It's not just, okay, so we all wonder what in 6 months our entire economy is going to look like, or what our house prices are going to look like. Or, you know, people are panicking. My wife is in pre-panic mode that we're going to be homeschooling in September.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What kind of wisdom do you give to that? And maybe you can even bring into like a spiritual moment too.
Yeah, and oftentimes right now with that, even preparing your body for a marathon, not a sprint, I think is a really helpful analogy for our brain to begin to say, like, we've started this on sprint mode. Make your bucket list, make your sourdough bread, do all the things that you can do, keep yourself busy, watch your movies.
Yeah.
But beginning to say, if this actually lasted, how do we create some long-term sustainable patterns for us so that we don't lose our mind? I think that all of the cramming in and trying to make sure we make the most fun, most productive, most connection-oriented time can be a lot of pressure, rather than saying, okay, long term, can we actually learn how to get our bodies into a place where we're bored and we're okay, or where, you know, a lot of those things happen. So
It's funny, we've had those conversations too. How can I be bored and okay?
Yeah.
Do some of our family stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting thought. We have dealt with the pandemic the way we deal with all of life. We calendar it, we rush through it, we try to be as fast paced as we can. Do you feel like this is a good opportunity for people to reevaluate their pace?
Yes. And reintegration has been something that I've talked about actually quite a bit this week in my practice and beginning to explore. I'm hearing over and over and over again, I just want to get back to normal.
Right.
But I think that part of I'm cautious to say gift of this, but part of the side of this that I think is really meaningful is that we actually have an opportunity to reassess what didn't work. And just jumping right back into our pace and our routine and all the things that weren't really working for us, that caused a ton of disconnection, a ton of anxiety. I think that there's a lot of things that need to go. And so I think spiritually beginning to check in and ground and really attune to the Lord on what is your intention for me in this season? What are the parts of my character you want to pull up? What are the parts of me that really need to be dealt with? And I think I'm seeing a lot of kind of this ushering up of this need to forgive, a lot of resentment coming up.
Right.
And so I think spiritually, this is a really important time to be able to lean in and to, one, trust something very, very big and much bigger than ourselves, because I see a lot of people kind of taking on a bit of the mini savior complex of I'm the one that needs to be stable and help everybody, rather than saying like my ability to attune to the Lord and to be able to connect to his resource, his stability, his peace is so relevant when all of this is just so far out of our individual control. And so we talk a lot, even in therapeutic world, in grad school and in a lot of research, they talk about how spiritual resource is one of the most powerful tools in therapy, and which is really beautiful and interesting, because I think we're seeing that come out now of when you actually cannot control anything, the world is literally falling apart. What do you turn to, and what is stronger than you in this time when you don't feel that way?
Right.
And that's a really beautiful, very humbling, raw process.
Yeah, what I tell people is we have to give up this illusion of control we never had anyway, but now you don't have it at all, and you have to trust that's really what faith is.
Yeah.
Because what we have is really a blend of faith and I'm going to do it myself, right?
Absolutely.
You know, that's how we've lived.
Yeah.
But now we are having to go, okay, I really don't have control, so okay, so let's do is my superpower is making it about me. So let's make it about me. Because like early on, I started to have a lot of insecure feelings about me and my job. And I would have, I can't tell you, I had night after night after night of almost the exact same dream. And it's a kind of an insecure with my work dream. And you can imagine, you know, I work with people publicly. That's my job, how all of this is coming out. But what's that? What is that? Where is that coming from? All of that. Is it just this season bringing out that insecurity?
Well, and I think that part of it is that the things that were predictable that actually gave you a lot of affirmation that said, hey, you're okay, you're doing a good job, even speaking and things like that are very, very public ways of saying, hey, this is what I'm good at. And then I get the affirmation, or oftentimes maybe not. People are very free with their comments.
Very nice. They're very nice.
But I think part of it is similar to the piece we talked about earlier of identity. If your passion is engaging and shepherding people and teaching and all of those things, that all of a sudden that is no longer steady.
Right.
And so I think insecurity, like the lack of security of a lot of the things that we found to be true, is the staple of this season. And so
I can't tell you how many times I've given messages that you can't have your work be your identity. But this has given me an opportunity to realize, to get to the space where I really want to be. And that is enough, you know, worthy now rather than worthy if.
Yes.
Right?
Beautiful. And I think we don't often realize how much affirmation we're getting from our work really regularly until we don't have it.
Yeah.
And so it's so much of that concept of you don't know what you had till it's gone. And we don't know how much stability our jobs, our work weeks provided for us until we have everything on Zoom. We don't realize how much affirmation comes from person to person interaction until we don't have that. And so even people coming in, and there's been an increase of, can you just tell me I'm okay? Can you just tell me I'm a good person? Can you?
She's
and
good
a lot
at that.
Of that.
She's actually good at that.
Thanks.
It's her superpower.
Thank you. But I think part of that is true, is that we are realizing, wow, there's a really, really deep kind of uprooted piece of us that was kind of soothed in a way. And I'll often use the analogy of like, people are doing this to you all day long, to our egos, to our identity.
Right.
And to begin to say, where do I get my identity and my worth if it's not from the people around me? And that's a very scary question.
Well, it is, and it's not, because if I find my identity in how you respond to me and you come at me with something negative, then I'm less. But my Heavenly Father doesn't ever treat me like that. He treats me like I treat my kid. My kid wins and they lose, and when they lose, I want to hug them. I don't want to embarrass them. I want to be there for them.
Beautiful.
This is the relationship that God wants us to get to, where we're not up and down with all of those things.
Beautiful. I love that you brought that up too, because some of the conversations that have been coming up are dealing a lot with attachment with God, and our belief about God being a good God, and is He a God that's capable of protecting me, and what does He promise, and those kind of things. And I think that that's been really beautiful to explore too, to begin to say, what is my concept of God? And if God is not a loving, safe God right now, this is a very scary season. And so in some capacity too, I think it's kicking up this need to say, maybe I do need a bigger box for God that could be very loving instead of a very critical God, because a critical God in this time is terrifying.
Right.
But a very relational, engaging, compassionate Father is a very different concept. So there's just
Jonathan knows that. He's always a good reminder to me of all of those things about the goodness of God. Here's the other thing too that I've learned in my life, and that is, there are certain things that I have in my life, but I'm not really grateful for them until I've lost them for a time. And then when I get them back, then I am more grateful for those things. I'm doing a wedding today. I don't get to do weddings in this season, but I really love them. And this season, I wonder if that can, if that will, how we can encourage that or develop that in our lives.
Yes. Which the intention behind that, I think, is really important to be able to say. And I know that gratitude journals are always a therapist pitch, but I think that there's such significance on having, whether it's a jar or a journal or some place where you're just beginning to write out, like, this is so life-giving to me to do a wedding. And can I begin to actually process how things feel? And we kind of liken it to when people will cut out sugar out of their routine, and then all of a sudden they have a candy bar and they realize how they feel. And in kind of a negative context of what happens in your body when you begin to reintegrate. And I think you're kind of experiencing that in some capacity of, as you begin to do weddings, how does that feel? And it's actually a neat opportunity to begin to say, oh, that didn't actually give me a lot of life, or that wasn't maybe where I needed to be, but I was just there by habit, versus this is so good for you.
Yeah. So a complete recalibration of how you do things and what you do, what have you. Leslie, our friend Leslie, has a habit that they did with their family. They have a jar, and whenever they can't do something, they write it down, and they're going to keep that jar for when they can go to the beach, go get yogurt, whatever that thing is that they're missing. I think that was a cool habit.
That's beautiful. And talking to people too, people have really good ideas right now. And there's just so many. I constantly have a little post-it on the corner of my notepad where I'm just writing down like this really beautiful book or this idea. There's just a lot of good creativity coming out of people.
Can that also be overwhelming too?
Absolutely.
Because then it's, oh, wow, that person is really handling this a whole lot better than I am.
Yeah. Which the comparison on the creative side and the comparison on the suffering side are flaring big time. And so I think Instagram is a really interesting practice that a lot of people are actually pulling back from right now, because it's just overwhelming. Like, you see these perfect picturesque things, you're like, where are you right now? Are you at your house? Like, just that interesting concept, but you see it on both sides. And so I think to be aware of it on both, and to say, if I'm beginning to become really critical of my routine or my need for rest, can I pull back? And can I engage on this side if I'm really suffering and someone else may be suffering more? Can I give myself permission to do what I need to do?
So we're reinventing how we do church every week, right? And we're trying to get better and better and better. But we can't watch every other church's video, because there are some that have 10,000 members and they already have recording studios and what have you. That comparison can really grab you.
Yeah, that's so funny too. Even this morning, before jumping on this, I was talking to a friend who just did a podcast last week that I listened to, and like, you were so good. I just feel like there's nothing new to say. And it's just totally the idea of like, everything has already been said, but how do you come up with something that feels meaningful? But I think the simple right now just feels important.
Well, we like you. There's
Thanks.
nobody better than you. I don't care what they
No,
say.
Affirmation.
I know, with an actual person in the room.
Yeah, it's helpful.
I don't even think there's 6 feet.
I know. It's a very small 6-foot table. Yes. Yeah.
Anything else that you think that people need to hear in this season?
No, it's just okay not to be okay is my mantra.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Allow, when you invite God in, then he has the power to deal with all of those other things that maybe you are really at your core. And maybe out of this season will come a freedom from worry work, or freedom from this insecurity that you feel like you're never going to be okay. You know, that maybe that God wants to do some really serious work. And I'm praying that in my own soul and some of the people at my church. And we're all going through it together, right?
Yeah, which is, I think, a really beautiful thing, too, to say. Like, there's no one that's exempt from this. And for the first time ever, it's not another country. It's not it's just we are in this. And there's a really beautiful uniting element to that is sweet to see. So,
All right.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining us for these last 10 steps. If you'd like to join us for another journey, or if you know someone else who's on this walk, subscribe to our podcast at 10 Steps Further on iTunes, or simply search 10 Steps Further on your podcast app. And if you'd like to be part of the conversation with a question or a comment or a criticism or even a wisecrack, look us up on Facebook. We've created a Facebook group where you can be part of the conversation. We'll see you next time.